Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, can we just quickly introduce ourselves? And after we've introduced ourselves, can we say what we want to get out of this meeting today, really? So I'll just go around as they are on the screen. So Kirsty, could you first?
Hi, I'm Kirsty Thomas. I'm from Coastal Housing and I'm a housing officer. I want to get out this meeting just to understand more about how lockdown has impacted your community and what they're doing perhaps to integrate the community and keep the community inclusive, and just get some ideas and share some thoughts really on how we're getting through it.
Lovely, thank you very much. And the next one, Rabab.
Hi everyone, I'm
Hi.
Rabab. I run an organisation in Cardiff called Gentle Radical. We work with cross-art form, contemporary culture, social justice and community work. I was kind of invited to come, so I don't really know. I have no thoughts about what I want to get out of it. I don't really know. I'm sort of trying to keep to a minimum how many platforms, like there's a lot of stuff like this going on, but I was encouraged to come along, and I think there are some interesting things to explore around what we're learning from lockdown. So yeah, I don't have any, like, I've not come with specific outcomes.
Okay, great, thank you. And Rachel?
Hi. Yeah, so my name, I don't know why it says Rach on there, but yeah, Rach is fine, Rachel. I'm actually working with Platform as a freelance consultant at the moment. So I work in communications and storytelling for third sector, that kind of thing. I've been doing that for about 18 months or so now. And kind of like Rabab, I didn't really come, I obviously got invited because of my work with Platform, and I've been working with them for, you know, quite a few months now, since the start of lockdown pretty much. So it's been very interesting. So I think, yeah, as a product of what I've been doing with them, coming to this was just kind of cementing my interest in this field, and wanted to see how I could maybe attribute my personal experience as well.
Thank you. We're being asked to leave the breakout room in 50 seconds. So could Noreen and Sarah please just say quickly who you are, what you're doing?
Co-production network for Wales, just interested in what other conversations are happening about post-lockdown new normal.
Thank you.
Sarah Williams, Equality Council, run Menopause Cafe and PMDD, peer support group. So just learning, sharing, listening.
Thank you very much, and thank you for doing that really quickly before we whisked away back into the main room. Yeah, these things are sent to try us, aren't they? Right, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for all.
Thanks.
We're going to try and go.
I forgot to record.
Welcome back. Just wait for you all to come back.
Sorry, Naomi, I'll get more off you when we next meet.
Okay, is there Claire? I can't see if everyone's back. Is everyone back?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, fab. Okay, so now I'm going to do a quick presentation. We're going to start with the really good stuff. So I've called this Let It Burn because I think this is about an opportunity to let the stuff that we didn't like in the world not come back with us. And those of you that have read Arundhati Roy's piece about this being a portal, I just need to move you in my way. There you go. So, you know, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew, and this one's no different. So this is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. So we can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies. Or we can walk through it lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And I just find that so inspiring, and I'm, you know, excited about you lot on this call, because you are the people I think are carrying this little luggage through to another world and ready to fight for it. And so this has come out from lots of different organisations and people as they reflect on what the virus has done for them. And the Children's Society just picked one organisation as an example, talking about unprecedented levels of collaboration, both internally and externally, and colleagues moving across into the internal organisational boundaries, so people not being so precious about their work, and people being prepared to test new tools to engage people, so people being prepared to work in ways they weren't before, and a real theme of stepping up and looking out for each other, so a more caring side to things happening. And this, published just last week by the Carnegie Trust, talked about the theme of partnerships between the third sector, local authorities, being able to provide a quick response, so how fast things have been able to move compared to our old world. And where this has worked well, and this is a sentence I relish in saying, so public sector, third sector, alongside communities, not with communities, communities, consulting communities, but alongside communities, taking on roles they do best, and people playing to their strengths. I mean, that's just miraculous. For any of you who've worked in public services will know the strength of that statement. And finding a shared passion, really, to assist local people. That's why we've been able to get to that place. So some kind of feelings that we weren't experiencing before, some things made us more passionate in wanting to help. And in some places a greater recognition that the contribution the third sector can make to community well-being. I'll come back to that point later. And so this is a local authority saying the culture change we've achieved, moving from silos to working together. And I've highlighted the words trust and friendship and speed, because they're not normally words you hear local authorities talking about: trust, friendship and speed. And kindness, operating with kindness and fundamentally improving our relationships. And of course, there have been amazing examples of how the new social infrastructure and how the communities have stepped in, and communities being really creative in creating connections around those social infrastructures. So, you know, I'm not suggesting that bingo nights on wide streets are everybody's cup of tea, but if they are on that street, then that's wonderful for that street, and that's how it should be. And of course, our connection to nature. So many reflections on how our connection to nature and the change of pace that this has brought, as we've all become more reflective and solitary by necessity, has brought us greater peace. And then just finally from Volunteering Wales, talking about this upsurge in volunteers. So we've had 17,500 more volunteers in Wales. Interestingly, more men are volunteering than ever were before. I mean, I would suspect that's because more women are at home doing everything else. Sorry to the men on the call, but I'm one of those women. And more working age people, less older people volunteering. And people are finding more creative ways of volunteering, as the traditional kind of befriending roles, if you like, haven't been possible. And that actually a large proportion of those people who've given something that they haven't given before want to continue. And that poses an opportunity and a challenge. So now we want to hear from you. We want to put you back into some talking groups. And this is a space for sharing and listening to you about what's been good for you. So see you in 7 minutes.
Right, hi again. So the question for this session is that what do you think has been good for you during lockdown? What the strengths have been, whether they're your personal strengths in your home life, within work, what have you seen the strengths within your community? Is there anybody who'd like to volunteer to go first?
I don't mind going first. I'd say for me personally, what's been good is it's really developed sort of my resilience, I would say, around, you know, you've got no control over the situation at the moment. You've just got to work with it. And it's in, I've lost like childcare because all the parents started shielding, and so that made it difficult. Then working from home, it's a whole other ball game, that is, working from home with a toddler. So I think it does like build you as a character. It makes you think more outside the box, and really just understand how you can work better with things. And I would say it's the same with my job then, because as a housing officer, it's very customer facing. We're out on the communities, we're doing our walkarounds, we're visiting our residents, and we haven't been able to do any of that. So again, it's just creating new ways of keeping the communication going, making sure they know you're there for them. Lots of them have needed help with like food parcels and support, health, everything like that. So it's really like, it's sort of giving you a new way of working, which is probably going to be the new norm. But it's really made you think more about how you was working before, and maybe how effective it was before to compare to now, and what works best then, and working with it to change it then better for the future.
Great, thanks very much. And Sarah?
Okay. Hiya, Laura.
Hiya.
Hi again. I'm Rabab, hello. I think just before lockdown, we were in touch on Twitter and I was going to come and visit your space. But yeah, good things, I think. It actually came at a time for me personally when I was looking for space and to reflect and wind down after a very busy 18 months personally. So that was good timing, I suppose. But also, I'm just amazed at the speed of things coming together locally. I live in Porthcawl now, not Cardiff. I'm a little bit gutted that I haven't been in Cardiff during this time in some respects, but it has helped me to settle here and feel more part of Porthcawl, which I was struggling to do. Lots of community activity and volunteering. So that has been amazing to see, and it's really helped my sense of community as part of this community. And in terms of the kind of voluntary groups that I was doing, they've kind of I've had peaks and troughs really based on my own ability to give that time. I started doing lots of voluntary work, phone buddying, and then realised actually I needed to speak to my kids every day who weren't at home, and then one came home and that changed the dynamics. And gender equality, about the amount, gender roles in this. And I was a mum again overnight, and that completely changed my routine, my time, and my ability to give it voluntary time. But I think good points, great things have been ability to work flexibly, which I was kind of doing anyway, but I haven't missed going up and down the M4 every day, and that's been amazing. So that flexibility in returning to the peer support groups, which I will be now in the next couple of weeks, being able to do it online means I can reach a bigger audience, hopefully, and be able to meet people that otherwise the groups I was running weren't necessarily accessible. So I think that's that's fantastic. But one of the hard things has been timing. Whatever time I wanted to do something, people were not. There was always a group of people who were not happy about it. And I think I felt there came a point then when I felt a little bit, oh, okay, I'm just going to have a little break actually.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Sorry, Sarah, I'm gonna have to move on.
Yeah, that's okay.
Can we go next? Oh, sorry. Oh. I don't want to do this again. They keep telling us to leave.
We need a timer.
Rach, go ahead, because still.
I guess for me, good things. Volunteering in my community. I live really rurally, and connecting with older people that literally live, a minute from me, that I have never met, never seen in my life, has been probably the best thing that I've done. I've made new friends from these people who, I'm 25, they have 50, maybe 30 years, 50, maybe 60 years on me. I think that's honestly been my favourite thing, because I would never have met them otherwise, and I actually have a lot in common with them. So it's been really nice, and I never expected that to happen. So yeah, that's a good thing.
Great, thank you, Rach.
That is
And last but not least,
Yeah, I mean, I got very involved with setting up the.
That was quick.
we got dragged out.
We only just got started.
That was quick, sorry, Anne.
There's plenty of time after this for a bit now.
Everyone's back and I'm Charlotte.
Okay, thanks for that. We can carry on those conversations in a second. So just a bit more ranting from me now to put some fire in your bellies, I guess, because I guess the point for me about doing this whole listening exercise is that for me at Platform and in my life, I sort of felt like we were trying to light fires to some of these platforms before coronavirus hit. And really we're trying to ignite burning platforms to affect change. And I'm hopeful actually that the chance that this portal that we are now walking through is a chance to really burn the house down really and affect change in really meaningful ways. So we're already thinking about how we change ourselves. You know, there was already a movement, people becoming more mindful, people talking about being much more present in themselves and authentic in their work. And, you know, a really big passion for me is about leveling this us and themness about how communities and help happen. And how we were moving towards recognizing that, like, you know, national ways of doing things, centralized ways of doing things aren't working, and how local is more inspiring, more real, and more beneficial to the people who live there. And those of you who know me know that I wrap this up in words like kind, that actually it's not kind to have services that don't affect change for real people, etc., and kindness in public policy. So changes to ourselves. And then that relates to changes to organisations that were, you know, the big shift, a new language about being trauma informed, you know, recognising that people are shaped by their life experiences. And if organisations can respond to people recognising that, then we've got a vastly different service offer and of help than we've got now. And that involves systems thinking, so recognising that everything's connected to everything else. You know, all people are all people, both working and in our community. And a really big emphasis in Wales, you know, leading the world in our aspirations for wanting to bring well-being to future generations and all the work that goes alongside that. And then, of course, the change the world ambitions. So for me, the adverse childhood experiences research, and I know many of you on this call, is just like a game changer. We've got Welsh research that says there's multiple adversities happening multi-generationally in our communities in Wales. So what are we doing about that? We can't unknow that stuff when we know it. We can't see the reasons why that's happening and not do anything about them, surely. Otherwise, what's the point? I already spoke about the Future Generations Act and the license that gives us to behave differently. The rhetoric coming out of government, so the loneliness strategy is really all about connecting communities. So, you know, isn't the support there already? Is the money there already? If you listen to that strategy, you would suggest that it is. And community responses to tackling social justice. I'll talk about more about that in a minute. So there are these burning platforms already ignited. And just wanted to do a bit of a systems change. You know, for me, this is what I'm talking about, that we're shifting from the perspectives on the left, where we have top-down hierarchical view of services, where provision is all from an internal point of view. So local authorities know what it feels like to be a local authority delivering services to the people. They don't think about what that service feels like to the citizen. So that's the old school, controlled by professionals. So we talk about service users, not people, as if they are passive, homogenous, rationally acting consumers of services that fit into groups that we need to assess whether they're in or they're out. The other side, of course, that we're setting a light to is this outside-in view from a citizen's perspective, where, you know, how we help each other is controlled by the citizens, and therefore services should be owned by the citizens, and citizens have recognizing that they have unique social identities. And so how we do the system on the left is the old way is we identify and we respond to a problem or a crisis, and we commission and create services to respond to that, which means there's centralized control. We develop specialisms with multiple front doors. We have a deficit-based view. You need to be sick enough, you know, you need to be chaotic enough, you need to be homeless enough to for there to be a problem, for that problem to get enough funding, for there to be a service. So you get this purchaser and commissioners provider split, leading to competition between people who really should be working together. So seeing each other as people to do better than, rather than people to work and learn from. On the other side of that, of course, is a different way, which is doing what matters. And actually that determines that we need to to answer what matters, we need to know what's working well, what's good already. The boundaries and timescales as to what help looks like, feels like, how long it takes would be set by a citizen and not by a service or how much money we've got. There'd be much more collaborative approach to commissioning around a shared purpose and people supporting themselves to live good lives. And then just another bit from Carnegie about this worry about the hyper-centralisation. So how governments have enjoyed the hyper-centralisation of the decision-making during the pandemic. And so how that flies in the face of the local speedy responses that local authorities have enjoyed, as we've seen. So there's just a bit of a danger sign there. But there's a real sense that local groups and local authorities knew what's best for their own community. And I already talked about the agility and speed in that response. But concerns about the future to this, really. To what extent will local organisations be in a position to continue their work? And this sentence, I think, is really interesting. And will local authorities be resourced to lead a localised recovery? But my challenge to you on this call is, should local authorities be the people in charge of leading localised recoveries? Why do we think that way? We've seen mutual aid groups blossoming. So I'm sure you are, like I am, a member of my Streets WhatsApp group now, where I wasn't before. And we've seen neighbourhood groups and mobilisations responding to trauma as a contextual experience. So recognising that we've all experienced this trauma, but some have felt it more than others in different ways. And you'll know that from your own experiences of this and from the people you know's experiences of this. But the response from you to your communities has offered an environmental contextual response to that trauma. So it hasn't been medicalised. We're not asking for more medication. We're not asking for more services. We're seeing the needs in front of us of our peers, our friends, our loved ones, our families, our neighbourhoods. And that's what we're responding to. So this is organic, gentle, fluid, reaching, messy, hyper-local. And the point is, it's mutual. You help me and I help you. Today I'm vulnerable, tomorrow you're vulnerable. It's mutual. But where is this going is my challenge to you in your next conversation. So the volunteering boot, that's fantastic, of course, that people are motivated by this local passion. But are we filling gaps in services? Are we filling gaps in services that actually should be there but aren't? And a little rant at Public Health Wales and their community response map tool to, and I quote, identify the communities in greatest need of support. So again, pulling us back to deficit language, identifying the most vulnerable communities, those most in need. And I know the intention of this map is good, but actually it formalizes, it brings process, it institutionalizes, it makes it organized and run. And then we have to ask, back to the point about burning the system down, whose perspective of it, from whose perspective is this good? Is that good from a services delivery perspective, or is that good from a citizen's perspective? And where's the mutual gone in that? That's back to us and them, the needy and the needed, the ones who need to deliver the services. And then just finally, remembering the barriers to the revolution. So these will be personal. You'll know people who just don't want to change because they don't like change. We've always done it this way, so can we just get back to that really quickly, please? People who don't believe in mutual aid actually, or don't think that they do, and think that actually the doctor should pick this up, or the social workers should pick this up, and this has nothing to do with us in communities. Structural barriers that have really been played out in dramatic ways across the world and locally, in Cardiff at least. You know, recognising that this virus hasn't discriminated equally, that some people have felt this more than others. And so we've woken up to the fact, actually, that there are huge barriers in the way of a real citizen-focused revolution. And the system, not forgetting that we are entrenched in a system that is obsessed with rationing. So we need to assess you, we need you to be ill enough to be able to get in. We have to measure how well we've done what we said we'd do, therefore you must tick our box. And we cannot cope with too much risks because we all need to be accountable. And we don't deal with messy and chaotic very well, so we need to put you all in neat boxes. So I'll stop ranting, but I wonder where that leaves you now. So you go back into your rooms for a good 10 minutes this time, about what impact this virus has had on you and how you live and work, for good and for bad. What do you think will stick? So remembering all that great stuff you just said, and on top of my rant, where do you think this leaves you now? So see you in 10. Thanks for listening.
Hi, so sorry about last time when we were whisked away. So, Rabab, do you want to go first this time? And you were telling us, you said, I've been involved in establishing some of the community and then we were whisked away. So
okay, yeah.
I want to talk about what that is, and and specifically for this section, do you want to focus on if any of that work you think will stick and stay and become that new normal?
Gosh.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, not your fault. Yeah, no, I was just saying that I was quite heavily involved in setting up the mutual aid group in Riverside, which has been a really interesting process, partly because there's been so much of a response from local people. Also, interestingly, so we set up a really thoroughgoing, a lot of work was done in terms of just designing a space like that and really thinking it through in terms of a lot of the safety measures and the safeguarding. And so kind of there's a lot of like community coming together and pooling lots of expertise. What's been interesting about it, I think, is actually there's been such a huge response from local voluntary sector organisations that actually there hasn't been as much take up as we imagined. And it's kind of really interesting. It's sort of almost like there have been all kinds, like for example, I'm thinking of, we've been picking up prescriptions with for people, we've been going and doing shopping, but there have been various different kind of services really, I suppose, responding. So kind of for me, one of the questions is, how do we get to identifying what the gaps have been in terms of some of the, for example, some of the mutual aid, some of the reciprocal processes that we've discovered and come to be accustomed to recently in these last few months, and the things that, where some of those gaps are. I mean, in a really multicultural community like Riverside, very few of our volunteers have been from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. That's really interesting. I suspect that's because actually culturally, a lot of the particularly Asian communities in the area will take care of each other. They have extended family groups. So that sense of mutual aid is literally culturally designed into people's lives, which I think is a really interesting model in itself. But the thing that we haven't really managed to address as much is huge amounts of isolation. What I actually think is needed is beyond just the kind of immediate sense of you know, day-to-day needs met, I suppose the exposing of the chronic amounts of isolation and loneliness for people. I think that there's deeper work that needs to happen there. So do I think things are going to last? I think there's huge, well, I'll come back to that. Maybe someone else wants to speak first because I've said a few things now.
Okay, does anybody think that any of the responses that you've been involved in during lockdown are going to stay? I know Sarah's mentioned, you know, that you haven't missed driving up and down the M4, but those things, do you think there will be more flexibility around how you will work in the future? Do you think some of the community responses that you've been involved in, Rachel said about, you know, meeting elderly neighbours as well, and how will that continue, and should it continue? Anybody?
Do you want to go,
I could be
Sarah,
really
or-
quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, you go, right?
No, it's fine. You go ahead. I can go after. No worries.
I was just to say, with similarly to Rachel, I was studying an older person. There are older people than me, but and it was a fascinating insight into isolation and loneliness. But I actually wanted to see the person, but I was restricted to phone calls. But I hope that kind of budding up could continue, and I'm sure it does somehow through some charity work. But I think it's maybe that, you know, community feel there could be encouraged to continue, especially in Porthcawl, the, you know, big older population. And I think just keeping the option for online interaction for accessibility reasons and being in rural communities and so on is so important. So I think that option needs to remain. I mean, I'm not planning to come to Cardiff anytime soon. So, you know, if I'm going to do a menopause cafe now, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be online.
Yeah.
But, you know, so I hope that stays as you know, and good way of working.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to say, from my sort of experience talking about like local community organising and that kind of thing, it was interesting that for some of the people who were involved kind of trying to run it was like village based, because like I said, I live rurally, so my thinking was that there is no reason to duplicate effort in villages that are quite literally like next to each other, and I wanted a really like a big oversight in terms of let's all pool, let's all get involved with each other, and surely there's things going on in that village that this village might not be able to do as easily, so there's a lot of things we can share. And it was interesting that as soon as like local councils and people who have normally been in like some form of power structure around here wanted to get involved, and all of a sudden it was conversations about, well, money and you know, have you applied for this, have you got funding, have you got this, and I'm sitting there saying no, we haven't. I haven't got this, I haven't got that. And what I was bringing to the table in terms of my experience with like frontline services and my work experience with what I do day to day, and just my personal, like as a human experience in terms of how I operate as a person and how I like to connect with people, didn't seem to hold as much weight around that table. And that was very interesting for me, and maybe that was me being naive because I am younger and I did expect to be listened to, and maybe that's says more about me in terms of I felt like I could come to that table as an equal, and I wasn't treated as such because I was evidently visually young and I wasn't talking their language. I was talking a completely different language about what I thought could be achieved. And I don't mean that to be negative against anyone personally or how, you know, certain people work or don't work. It was just an interesting experience to go through that made me think a lot in terms of how much people are going to be willing to let go. That's what worries me, I guess. Maybe worry is a strong term, but makes me think, like, I wonder if that can happen. And if it can, we need to support. Can those people be supported in order to contribute and think in new ways, or expand how they were used to thinking about those things, which is a conversation that would involve everybody. You know, it's not to make it oh, you can't be involved because you're traditional support, you're too over there, and you can't speak to me because I'm new and radical. It doesn't work. So
yeah. That though, I actually do think we have to have conversations like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think because I don't think it's just about your youth. So I would also, I'm not young, but I would absolutely say that the tendencies for existing resources of power, existing kind of groups, existing constellations that have always kind of controlled how resource is organised and who it goes to and on whose terms, we'll have to do a lot of work to let go of that. And I don't think it's just because you're young. I think it's because we're deeply, deeply entrenched in systems that have operated in a very long, in a way for a very long time. And so I think that's where, like, actually Black Lives Matter is so key in that sense, because it's literally trying to dismantle the entire design of how things have been done. And I think that's where we need to take our leadership, actually. Mm-hmm. What reparations look like on community levels needs to completely transform, in a way, those power, kind of traditional power sort of spaces, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Kirsty, I know you haven't had a chance to say anything. And
that's okay. Yeah, I totally agree with all of you. Really, it's changing mindset, it's changing behaviours, it's changing what everybody's used to. In terms of our organisation, we're already systems thinking and trauma informed, so we're already ahead of the game. But trying to get that across our communities and change everybody's way of working. Some people are on board, some people aren't. They just don't see the benefits of it. So I think, it's going to be a struggle, because the new norm is not what people are used to, but it is the way that people has got to think creatively, think out of the box. And
Where's Tracy Kelly gone?
Sorry, I'm there.
Welcome back. Okay,
Charlotte.
Everybody back? Okay, fab. Thank you for that, and I hope you have enjoyed the re-examining of everything you've been told. And so, just final question for a short conversation in your groups is really now, how do we intentionally create the future we want to see? So everything that you've learned and reflected, how do you make it stick, and what is your role in this? And what do you expect of others as well, I guess? So at the end of this round, I'll be asking each group to feed back and to give us one takeaway from each group. So just bear that in mind as you go in for the next 7 minutes and have your final thoughts. Okay, see you in 7.
We cut you off then, Kirsty, as well. Right, okay. So the question is really, so how is this going to stick? We started talking about that, and we started talking about how although the communities were activated and were involved in providing that response, some of the powers that be will have a bit further to go in giving up some of that control and having those difficult conversations about what the community really needs. So what will your role going forward be in trying to make these changes, whether that's in your kind of professional life or in your personal life, in your own community or in your workplace? And Kirsty, do you want to go first, because you were whisked away last time?
Yeah, I mean, personally, in my local area, you can already see the volunteer groups sort of dispersing and people getting back to more normal life. I think it was quite short-lived, to be honest with you. And I expected that, because people, initially jobs are being, people furloughed, or people are losing jobs. But as time goes on, all that's sort of easing, and people don't have the time or the capacity to be able to keep volunteering and keep the community spirit alive. In my job, obviously my job is very community orientated, so for myself now, my role is really thinking of how I can keep these communities active. Each area I work in have their own little committee, their own little community, and a lot of them are elderly residents, so it's about really coming up with new ways so that we can still perhaps meet, you know, every now and again as they used to, and they can still look to each other for support, because at the moment they've mostly been shielding, so they've only really relied on community services, or, you know, we've had really good support from PCSOs and things like that, but again, as time goes on, that sort of support's probably going to have to withdraw, and it really is about linking in with each person and see what their needs are and how we can continue to drive forward a community, but not face to face.
Okay, thank you.
The organisation, so when it's not going to be face to face anymore.
Right, okay. And Sarah?
Yeah, I think I loved what Rachel said, and I'm absolutely behind it. Like locally, you know, I'm new to the area, learning about personalities, but I can see actually how, you know, power goes straight to those people, not always the right people. And I've seen some, you know, bad choices about who gets support and who doesn't happening. So I think I want to like definitely amplify voices of younger people locally. Black Lives Matter movement here we've started is fantastic. You know, elevating young people as well to be heard if there's anything that can be done to support that, but also really importantly maybe some reverse mentoring. So, you know, there's probably stuff I can learn as well. Keep in touch, please, Rachel. And I'm thinking about my groups and how going forward can I incorporate other people into those groups and to focus a bit more on the isolation element of what I've been doing so far, but certainly locally challenge and show up. I'm going to the town council meeting Thursday night, listen, challenge, and just yeah, keep showing up, I think, like a pest.
Thanks. Who next? Who next?
I'm really happy to echo that. I think reverse mentoring is really a brilliant idea, and I also think that yeah, I think young people, I don't want to sort of patronize, but like we live in a really adultist society. We don't actually talk about the structural discrimination against the young, and that's exactly what that experience was like, Rachel, isn't it? Like, what is it in an individual who doesn't feel that they have to listen in the same way? So for me, that is like a really political project. I actually think we have to become radically politicized, because the great fear is that one of the reasons there were such grave problems for people is because we'd had 10 years of the most appalling chronic austerity, which we are going to be going back to that and some, you know. So I don't think the kind of old ways of just like us getting by and tolerating. I think one of the things that has to happen is at a community level, we have to mend the divisions, the austerity and, you know, really kind of xenophobic kind of foreign policies and anti-immigrant kind of attitudes. I think all of that has to kind of be mended somehow. So I would really argue that unless we have a healing justice frame, not just a social justice, like really talking about what does healing mean for people, and that means having time to be in spaces together. We cannot work as much as we have been doing. We cannot be stressed. I had to stop work at the end of last year because of burnout, and I am in great company. You know, that cannot be, being burnt out and exhausted, all of us, the solution to kind of mending. So I think that takes huge resistance to going back to business as usual. The other final thing I wanted to say is we're now thinking about, I'm sort of thinking about how do we do a door-to-door step, door-to-door series of dialogues to consult with everyone in the community about actually what they want to keep, you know, from this period, what worked, what changed, and what they want to leave behind, you know. So what do they, well, rather, what do they want to go back to? What do they definitely want to retain, and what do they want to kind of shift? And so there's something about how do we have those dialogues with the community that go beyond the digital, because of course there's so much exclusion around that. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And we are going to get whisked off soon. So if before we do, is anybody willing to feed back from our group? Is that silent?
No one said anything.
Is that silence? Okay.
Rachel
right.
is me.
What
Did
do I need to feed back? I'll do it, but what
It's
should I...
just a couple of points really from these sessions. I think some of the questions around austerity, and actually we were already there, and now we're going to be going back, and some of that thing about what we leave, what we take forward, and asking the community. But I think one of the points that you meant about power and relinquishing some of that power was really useful, and if we can feed that back in as well, and anything else add to. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that's it for our breakout groups. I think so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to see all your faces this time. I couldn't see you before. Great. So let's just get stuck in and ask for a taste of whatever, because you all haven't heard what each other are saying. So if I could ask Kieran first. Where's Kieran? Either you or someone from your group, what a takeaway from your discussions?
I think summing up from that last bit there is about this is something that we can't do by ourselves. It's got to be a collective collaboration, but that's not just about coming together as a movement. It's about making sure there's a shared voice. But I think it was, as Jen said, it's about recharging yourself. When you come into this, when you might be stuck in a different world and you come into something like this and you speak to collective people, it helps recharge and it helps bring that drive back for that collective movement. And that's what we very much felt. And I think that was the biggest takeaway, is as organisations and as individuals, we can't do this by ourselves. It's something that has to be done collaboratively. And I think that was a fair summary of it. If anybody wants to correct me from my group, please say so.
No, fab. Thanks, Kieran. So if I ask Tracy next.
Yeah, same as Kieran's group, really. It's about that. Nothing can be done without working collaboratively. And it was also about, everyone spoke about just having a go at doing something new and different, and not, if it doesn't work, that's fine. But it's about opening those doors to a new way of working. But it's about ensuring that work continues and it just doesn't go back to services being quite covetous about themselves, which is how it has been for quite some time. It's about working together as one. So again, if you think you want to add more to that, please feel free.
Anybody? No? If I come to Laura, thank you. Laura, what about your group?
Rachel's going to feedback on behalf of our group.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I think I think there was three really interesting points that came out of our general discussion. So one, in terms of the collaborative point that a couple of other people have just made, we were talking about dialogues, like door-to-door consultation within communities. So talking to people about what was working before and what might be working now, and really feeding that, like authentically feeding that back in. The second was about people not being afraid to be radically politicized due to austerity and the fear that we might be returning to that, and Rabab said return and then some, unfortunately, might well be the case, and factoring that in as well. And then the last and third one for me is facilitating conversations with traditional structures as well, and kind of having an understanding that perhaps now, after everything that's been happening and is continuing to happen, that people that operate in more traditional structures of power, quote unquote, may well be feeling a strange sense of vulnerability themselves. And there's been a lot of questions asked of them, and, you know, of what's happening and what's going to change and all of that. So to facilitate conversations, to take that into account, and that vulnerability and openness doesn't have to be bad, and that it can actually facilitate really open conversations and sharing. So
yeah, amazing. Thank you, Rachel. And finally, Suzanne.
We had a talk about how, difficult it is working from home and some of the challenges, but also, rather than see it as the separation of home and work, how much learning has been done about bringing your whole self. And Vicky's children have taught her that there's a new understanding of fail. First attempt is learning. And we talked about this mindset that underpins even the discussions we're having, about trying new things is this fear of failure. But if we see it as a first attempt is learning, and we reflect on that, and we also look at the assumptions that were underpinning it, we start to move forward. But Marlene made the point as well that the organisation has to support this. It has to provide a safe space to fail, and it needs to be underpinned with kindness, because otherwise we're still going to be afraid to do anything differently, or to feel that we're being judged in some way. And that we are the community. It's not them and us, it's us. What do we want? And how do we go forward? But again, group, if you want to add anything.
Great. Does anybody want to say anything else that they've... Fabulous. Thank you so much. So I'm including you now as a movement of people who will be doing this, particularly your point, Rachel, about whilst this is about speaking truth to power, it's recognising that those in power have lost power through this and might be feeling vulnerable too, so that there is a moment of connection, natural connection here, in the same way that we talked about the experience of trauma that we've all shared. There's an experience between organisations and communities in their traditional senses, or how they're perceived. There's a levelling already, so it might be a moment to have a conversation, and I'd be interested to hear your views. Please get in touch, let me know. How would we do this? So if it's incumbent upon all of us to do it, how are we going to do it? Because is this like traditional ways of doing it that are no longer useful? We don't want to go to government roundtables, or do we? Do we want to put on a conference where we tell everybody this stuff, or do we? Because that just feels like what we were doing before, and I'm not sure how. I'm not saying it wasn't effective, because obviously I've done loads of those things myself.
Look where we are.
But it's really about let's tell a different story somehow that's powerful enough to be heard in a different way. So I'd be really interested in carrying on doing that with you all, and hope you would be too. So thank you so much for your time. Look out for the results of this, because there's, as you know, these are a series of conversations, and we will write it all up, and your voices will be very much part of that. And then think about what we do with that. So what are we igniting by it? So bye, Noreen. Yeah, great. And if anybody wants the present, thanks for coming. If anyone wants the presentation, I heard the ask, so yeah, I can send that on to anybody who wants it. Thanks all so much. See you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Facilitators.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye, Paul.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, Babs, no probs. Paul, leave.
How do we leave?
Right hand corner.
Look at a room. I'm there.
Leave.
Come on, just now. Bye.
Okay, is it just this?
I think so.
Yay. What was it?
Very distant.
Very
It
different.
was good.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think so.
One of the women in my group was that disillusioned. She left the NHS at the end of May.
Oh, yeah.
that disillusion. So yeah, that was quite interesting. Yeah, and she was quite happy to share some of that. So that's brought some really good stuff out, because she's saying like she was quite high up, and she said she felt liberated because she can actually feel like she can talk about stuff now without threatened with having a registration taken away. So I thought that was quite deep and meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a lady that's self-isolating, and she doesn't work, she's a volunteer, she's got health issues, but she was lovely talking about the community and the volunteers and how people from organisations have got to know about them where she wouldn't even be known about previously. So they want to sit on the chair of their volunteer group they've got, so that's been quite a positive thing. And Paul, the last guy to leave, he's from like the homeless sector, so he's coming in on that group. He's concerned about volunteers and how the community volunteers are being used in a way. Feel like some services should go back under local authorities, but the balance.
Yeah, that's good. That's exactly what that's what we want to get out, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a very different feel though, and especially because I could see them, that helped. And they were very engaged and they're really happy to talk. It's not a case of having any kind of, because that was one of my fears, is that I would have to nudge them all the time. They're more than happy to talk. And it was really interesting talking about Riverside, about how there had been this massive kind of coming together as a mutual response, yet the BME community didn't really engage with that, and were kind of supporting themselves.
Okay.
And so was that the right response? And those sorts of questions really about who was providing that, and that's where the doorstep kind of asking people what they want came from. But I think Rachel works for Platform.
Oh, does she?
Did Rachel say she works for Platform? I think so. No, anyway, she was great, and she was talking about how because she's quite young, and I think she looks younger than she is.
A bit like me, Laura, really.
I was going to say nice for some. She was saying about how she'd made some really good connections with some of the older people where she lived in quite a rural area. Then when she was talking to some people who were seen to be in power, they didn't take her seriously, although she'd been doing that work. And then that was all about kind of, right, have you applied for this fund? Have you applied for that fund? And trying to push it into structures and systems when actually that wasn't what they wanted. So there was some really good stuff that came out of it, but she was brilliant.
Yeah, one of the ladies in my group was the same. She does the Voluntary Alliance in Wrexham, and she was saying that she's been in touch with a lot of people and they don't want the funding because they don't want to go into that structural setup, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And that's why I put that in, because I heard that ranty podcast about that like mutual aid means mutual aid. It doesn't mean funded aid by some people to
exactly. Yeah.
I was just going to ask Vicky how it was for her, because Vicky's going to be a, what's it called? What we are, facilitator.
Yeah, I loved being a participant. I think I want to be a participant every time, actually. I love being a participant. It was quite nice for me to be able to come out of it from an organisational perspective and just actually be me, because I think today was more about that, wasn't it? It was asking people to come as kind of part of their community and what they've done within their community. So I enjoyed that, and it was different to how I expected it to be, though. I think our two other kinds of colleagues, Suzanne, in there, they were really struggling to find the positives first of all, weren't they? And really kind of identify that, because it's been an incredibly hard time for people. That didn't surprise me, but the way that the conversation turned into becoming more positive about the future was really, that was quite strong actually, wasn't it, I think, from the two people that were in the group as well.
I think you putting your daughters into it with the fail thing was really helpful, because, and I think there's a lot of honesty and people willing to look into their own, like the answers live within ourselves. They went there, didn't they? Like, I know they were talking about their negatives, losing funding and the bigger organisational stuff, but it all came back to themselves and how they can move forward with themselves in a different way. What's holding everybody back is that mindset. Like, even when we're discussing it, we're still discussing it, changing the old system. And what they're wanting to do is, I felt really totally moved. And that's where the idea of fail came up, which was, it's just a fail is just the first time you're learning something. So it needed that sort of shift to make us like lift.
Good. And just it worked better bouncing in and out like that, didn't it, than last time?
Yeah.
It was good and
The
focused.
first one went really quick. What was that one? Yeah, the first one, it went really quick.
Yeah. But was it okay? Because it's nice.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
But I do wonder for the first one if we should, it's hard to judge, isn't it? Because we don't know how many people are going to be there. But it was about a minute per person.
Okay.
I was trying to work that out, Kieran, as well.
Yeah. And it felt like it was about a minute per person, and I had to rush a couple of people at the end for them to get into that.
I mean, but what's been good, the good things?
No, just what would you like to get, introductions, and what would you like to get out of today?
Okay, you need a bit more time on that one.
I felt like I started rushing people at the end of it.
Yeah. Just to get I just wanted to know more about, I couldn't quite catch where most of them worked. I get the field they were in, but I wanted to sort of, but I don't know if you've got that information when they enroll.
We should have that, shouldn't we, Claire? We know where they were.
Well, we tend to just get it from their email address, basically. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I had a blank picture of one, but she actually works at, she did apologise. She said her camera's not working. I thought, but she's from Llanmai, working with young people, but they've been talking online technology-wise, young people from all over the world, and she said that's something we're definitely keeping.
Right. They want to get their cameras working then.
Yeah. Maybe it was just me.
All right, fab. Thank you all so much. So we got Social Care Friday. So I'll change the presentation again.
How did it feel for you, Charlotte? Because I'm aware that we've all muted ourselves, and so it just feels like this wall of silence coming to you when you're talking.
Yeah, it sounds like someone was hoovering. I could hear this. Yeah. Could it sound okay?
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, it's fine.
Breaking up the presentation definitely helped me slow down, so I was able to just take more time to say what I wanted to say. So that felt much better to me. I hope it felt better on the receiving end.
Yeah, and people were picking up on what you were saying as well. So they were saying that point that Charlotte made and stuff like that, and then making their own point. So that's really useful.
Better. And the sharing the screen, I got much better at all that. So they came back to it rather than having to see me faff about. So that was good. It was better.
I wasn't involved in the first one, but for me, because when we did the practice run, we had the presentation was longer. So for me, it definitely worked better because I think people were able to like reflect on different parts of it. It was more in bite-sized chunks for them, wasn't it? So definitely from that point of view.
From Friday, yeah, it was too long. And it's quite nice to do a positive bit, so get them on the positive chat, particularly if they were struggling, and then the challenge. So, yeah. So now I have to slag off social workers for Friday. Okay.
Have you got on Friday? Have many registered?
We got 16, have we, so far?
About 17, I think, yeah.
So if you know any social workers, please.
I do, yeah. And the way it's not so much on Twitter, but if we could do like a Facebook thing, that's when it seems to get more.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll ask comms. I'm not a Facebook person, but we have got a Facebook thing. Okay.
I'm more likely to get people buying in outside of this bubble, if that makes sense, if I was to use Facebook.
Absolutely.
My Twitter's very related with similar-minded people.
Similar people, that's exactly, you put it much better than I did, Kieran, thank you.
That's the people who are interested. I was saying a couple of friends who I used to work with who are commissioners in Brighton and Cornwall now. That's where they picked up on it, was through Facebook rather than Twitter.
Yeah. That's really good to know. So I'll get them on that. Yeah, because we can advertise. We need to go today now on advertising Fridays. So we've got the weekend to advertise substance misuse, which I think has already got quite a lot as well, hasn't it, Claire?
Yeah, I think it's 20 something already. I think. Yeah, something like that.
What's the housing one?
And I've had to be careful because quite a few of the managers from Kaleidoscope that I've known over 10 years, they're coming on it, but then I thought, oh, the great guy, but it's actually their line manager, so I've not invited him, to be honest. So I have to rethink that email.
Yeah.
you got many for the housing one yet?
I think it's around 18 so far.
Okay, I'll keep pushing that one out as well.
And I haven't done any.
If you could do a general one, and then for me, it's much easier for me to tag people on Facebook who I know work in social care, substance misuse and housing, than the same thing on Twitter. I don't like tagging people on Twitter.
No.
But it just feels a bit more personal to do that through Facebook.
So we can put the link to the general lessons from lockdown, and then when they can see all the different topics. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say something else. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, the housing one. I haven't sent any invites yet. Like everybody else has had direct invites, all the other events, but housing hasn't yet. Just because I thought it would fill up really quickly. So and leadership is already in the 20s.
Oh right.
Right. I'm gutted I'm missing that one, because that one I think would be a really, really interesting one.
Yeah.
I think I might keep a similar presentation to today for leadership, to just talk about you're all shitbags. Serious. It's like, we don't want to do what we've done before, like shit things that I've done.
Yeah, like round tables and conference.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thanks so much. So, see you Friday.
Okie doke.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you.
See you, folks.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.